I never thought a single evening could shatter my entire world. But last Tuesday did exactly that. I came home later than usual from work, exhausted and hoping for a quiet night. The house was suspiciously quiet. No sign of Mark, my husband. The way he usually left his car keys on the counter, the TV murmuring in the background. Then I saw them, Mark and Lily, my neighbor, standing in the living room, pressed close, whispering something I couldn't hear. Their heads leaned in, their hands brushing against each other in a way that made my stomach drop. My first instinct was to scream, to throw myself into the room and confront them. But something stopped me. Something icy and sharp. I froze. Instead, I leaned against the doorframe, forcing my expression to remain neutral. I watched them for a few heartbeats, pretending I was just a passerby, oblivious to the scene unfolding before me. Mark laughed at something Lily said, and I realized that I had been completely blind. The man I trusted with my life, the man I called my husband, was smiling at another woman the way he once smiled at me. I walked away quietly, pretending to be absorbed in my bag, my keys, anything. They didn't notice me leave. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel, my chest tight. Anger, disbelief, and heartbreak collided in a messy storm. But deep down, I knew yelling or confrontation would give them power. I couldn't let that happen, not yet. The next morning, I acted normal. Too normal. I kissed Mark goodbye as if nothing had happened, even though I still smelled Lily's perfume lingering in the living room. I made small talk at breakfast, asking about his day, about work. He answered casually, unaware or pretending to be that the dynamic had shifted. Inside, I was plotting. I had to figure out what they were thinking, what they really wanted. I started noticing the subtle things that had escaped me before. A certain glance, a lingering text notification, the way Mark's voice sometimes changed when he thought I wasn't listening. And Lily, she was bold, dangerously so. She would linger near the mailbox when I went out, flashing me smiles that didn't reach her eyes. At the community block party that weekend, she laughed at Mark's jokes a little too long, leaned in a little too close. It was deliberate. She wanted me to see, to feel powerless. I had two choices: explode now and lose control, or wait and turn the tables. I chose the latter. I began recording, discreetly. My phone captured Mark's text to Lily. "Can't he wait to see you tonight, and I'll handle it, don't worry." The words stabbed me like knives, but I remained outwardly calm. I installed a small camera in the living room, masked as a decorative item. Every movement, every whisper, every stolen laugh would be recorded. I wasn't a victim, I was a strategist. Lily didn't make it easy. She started leaving little reminders around the neighborhood, notes, smiles, even compliments when we ran into each other. It was subtle, but it was taunting. I could see her calculating every gesture, every word. She thought I was blind. She thought I didn't notice her intrusion, and maybe I hadn't noticed at first, but now I did. Every step they took, every secret glance, I cataloged in my mind. I was building a case, piece by piece. I continued to play the part of the unsuspecting wife. I laughed at Mark's jokes, even the ones about Lily. I asked him about his day, casually nudging him to mention Lily. Each time he did, I recorded the conversation, my voice calm, my smile sweet, masking the storm inside. At night, I lay awake, replaying every moment, imagining the perfect reveal. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. Then came the moment I realized I might be underestimating Lily. She began noticing small changes in my behavior, the way I lingered with my phone, the way I smiled too knowingly. I could feel her suspicion growing, like a vine creeping toward me. I needed to be careful. One misstep, and everything would unravel. But Mark, he still didn't suspect. He still acted as though our home was normal, as though the trust between us remained intact. That ignorance was my weapon. I began inviting them both over under the guise of friendliness, forcing small interactions where I could watch and record. I made tea, served snacks, laughed at jokes. All while my mind was spinning webs of strategy. They were cocky, careless, thinking they held all the power, that arrogance would be their undoing. One evening, I let slip a secret I didn't have, a fabricated story meant to test their reactions. Lily's eyes flickered, a brief shadow crossing her expression. Mark froze for a second longer than he should have. I smiled politely, concealing my triumph. I had just pushed the first domino. Every night, I went over the recordings, the texts, the camera footage. I analyzed tone, timing, and reaction. I cataloged betrayal like a scientist studying a dangerous chemical. It burned me, yes, but it also empowered me. I was no longer just a wife scorned. I was a force they had underestimated, and I was only getting started. I had reached a point where patience became my most potent weapon. Every glance, every careless gesture from Mark and Lily was now fuel for my plan. I started leaving little hints of trust around the house, letters casually mentioning my forgiveness, subtle remarks about how I understood Mark's work pressures, even suggesting that I knew nothing about his late-night outings. The more I acted like the oblivious wife, the more reckless they became. One evening, I decided to invite them both over for dinner. Mark looked pleased, Lily thrilled, the kind of smug expressions that people wear when they believe they are in control. I spent the afternoon preparing everything meticulously. The food, the lighting, the seating, it all had to be perfect. Not for comfort, but for leverage. When they arrived, I greeted them warmly, smiling in a way that disarmed both of them. I thought it would be nice to have everyone together, I said casually, my tone light, almost cheerful. Mark nodded, caught off guard by my calmness. Lily, sensing a trap, masked her unease with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dinner proceeded normally, or so it seemed. I asked Mark about his week, subtly encouraging him to mention Lily. Each word he spoke was recorded discreetly, each smile catalogued. I offered Lily dessert, watching her hesitate just slightly, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. I let it slide. That hesitation was a crack in their armor. After dessert, I excused myself briefly, retreating to check the camera footage I had hidden earlier. There they were again, Mark and Lily, whispering, smiling, thinking the room was empty. I felt the cold thrill, knowing that every lie, every betrayal, was being captured. I leaned against the wall, silent and invisible, letting their arrogance feed my resolve. Later that week, I began testing my secret information strategy. I casually mentioned to Mark that I had read an article about infidelity in the neighborhood, hinting that I knew more than I let on. His reaction was subtle, but revealing a tightening of his jaw, a quick glance toward Lily. Lily, on the other hand, tried to maintain her composure, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her drink. Small victories, but they mattered. I realized, though, that my plan carried risk. If Lily caught on too soon, she could flip the narrative, manipulate Mark, and turn my own strategy against me. So I refined my approach. I began to feed them false confidence, letting them think I was weak, oblivious, and forgiving. I laughed at jokes that stung, complimented Mark in ways that made him overconfident, and occasionally dropped a remark about how much I trusted him. The tipping point came one night, when Mark left his phone unattended. I picked it up with deliberate casualness, scrolling through texts and pictures. Lily had sent him a photo, a private, intimate one, taken during the week they thought I was asleep. My fingers shook, but my face remained impassive. This was the proof I needed to orchestrate the next phase of my plan. I began planning a coincidental gathering at our house, a small neighborhood get-together. everyone from the street would be there, friends and acquaintances alike. I knew that public exposure would be far more effective than private confrontation, and more satisfying. Mark and Lily, blissfully unaware, volunteered to help set up. I smiled at their eagerness. Let them dig their own graves. As the night approached, tension coiled inside me like a spring. I set up cameras strategically, ensuring every angle captured the interactions without revealing my own presence. I prepared subtle clues to lead Mark and Lily into revealing themselves further: a half-finished letter, an open browser window, even a text accidentally sent from my phone that I had fabricated. Every element was designed to provoke overconfidence and carelessness. On the evening of the gathering, everything unfolded perfectly. Mark and Lily arrived, their smiles bright, their laughter a little too loud. I greeted neighbors warmly, maintaining the facade of innocence. As conversations flowed, I observed the pair closely, noting every touch, every shared glance. It was as though they were performing for me, unaware that I was the one directing the show. Then, at the right moment, I let a comment slip. I mentioned a funny incident with Lily from earlier in the week, one that never happened, but one I had planted carefully. Her reaction was immediate, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she masked it with laughter. Mark, caught off guard, hesitated, and I knew I had them exactly where I wanted. After that, I subtly steered conversations to topics that made them uncomfortable. Questions about loyalty, trust, and honesty floated into the room, casual and indirect, yet impossible to ignore. Neighbors exchanged glances, sensing tension that Mark and Lily tried and failed to hide. My heart raced, but I kept my expression calm. Every word, every gesture, every micro-expression was being recorded, stored for the moment of ultimate revelation. By the end of the evening, I had enough material to confront them publicly or privately, depending on the situation. But I wasn't done manipulating yet. I needed one final move to ensure the full impact, a dramatic collapse of the world they had built on lies. I began laying the groundwork for that collapse. I drafted messages, scheduled interactions, and even prepared a staged accidental discovery by another neighbor. Mark's confidence, Lily's arrogance, my comfort, they were all variables in a carefully calculated equation. I had become something I never thought I could be: cool-headed, relentless, and terrifyingly patient. And yet, a small voice in the back of my mind warned me. If I slipped, if I allowed anger to cloud my judgment, it could all fall apart. The stakes were higher than ever. I was no longer just protecting myself. I was orchestrating a complete reversal. A moment of weakness could destroy everything I had worked for. Night after night, I went over every detail in my mind. I rehearsed conversations, anticipated reactions, and adjusted my plans. Mark's subtle cues, Lily's calculated smiles, they were predictable when examined closely, and I was learning every move. My home was no longer just a house, it was a stage, and I was the director of a drama they had unknowingly agreed to star in. By the time the weekend came, I was ready. The trap was set, the evidence gathered, the provocations in place. Mark and Lily were moving toward the inevitable, unaware that every step had been choreographed by me. I allowed myself a brief moment of satisfaction, a quiet smile in the dark, knowing that the moment of reckoning was finally near. I had been careful, patient, and strategic, but nothing could have fully prepared me for the moment when Lily began to suspect me. I noticed at first in her eyes a flicker of doubt when I smiled too knowingly, a hesitation when she spoke. I realized she was dangerous, more aware than I had anticipated. One slip, and my entire plan could unravel. But I didn't falter. I leaned into the role I had perfected, the unsuspecting, forgiving wife. I laughed at Mark's jokes, complimented him, and even invited Lily over under the guise of friendliness. Behind my calm exterior, I was calculating every step, anticipating their moves, and creating a web of subtle traps. Every whispered conversation, every careless smile, was cataloged in my mind. Then came the night of the emotional explosion. Mark, emboldened by his belief in my obliviousness, let slip something too revealing. It was a small comment, one that could have gone unnoticed if not for my meticulous attention. I remained silent, letting the words sink in and fester. The tension in the room became unbearable. Lily noticed my quiet focus, confusion flashing across her face. "Jessica, is everything okay?" Mark finally asked, his voice tight. "Oh, I'm fine," I said, voice soft, almost sweet. "I just overheard something interesting." Mark froze. Lily shifted uncomfortably. I let the silence stretch, letting the doubt and fear simmer. Then I casually mentioned something I found in Mark's phone. Fabricated message from Lily. Their faces went pale. They realized I knew far more than they had ever imagined. The next few days were a delicate dance. I continued my act, allowing them to believe they still held some control. But every interaction was now a minefield for them. I fed them just enough confidence to keep them reckless, while I quietly built my case for the ultimate reveal. I gathered every recording, every text, every captured glance, assembling a comprehensive collection that could not be disputed. Finally, the moment came. I invited them to a community gathering under the pretense of friendship. Friends, neighbors, acquaintances, all were present. I had planned it meticulously, cameras in place, subtle cues laid, evidence ready to be shown at the perfect instant. Mark and Lily arrived, unsuspecting and smug, their arrogance intact. I led them to the center of the gathering, smiling warmly. Then I began dropping hints, recounting stories that only someone who had observed them closely could know. Their faces betrayed panic and confusion. Whispers spread among the neighbors. I could see Mark's confidence cracking and Lily's composure slipping. Then I revealed the proof. The recordings, the messages, the photos. They were displayed in a way that left no room for denial. Mark's face went red, Lily's lips trembled. The neighborhood watched, shocked, as the lies and betrayals unfolded before their eyes. I stayed calm, collected, my expression serene. "You thought I didn't know," I said softly, almost kindly. "But I did. I've known everything." Mark tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. Lily looked at me, eyes wide, realization dawning too late. Every deceit, every secret meeting, every whispered promise had been documented. They had played their game thinking they controlled it, but I had orchestrated the entire reveal. Afterward, I left. I packed my bags quietly, moving to a new city where no one knew my name, where I could start fresh. The relief was intoxicating, the liberation absolute. I felt the weight lift off my chest, replaced by a fierce sense of pride. I had survived betrayal, navigated deception, and turned the situation entirely in my favor. I began writing, recording, and sharing my story not out of spite, but to reclaim my narrative and warn others. I turned pain into power, heartbreak into strategy. My life was no longer defined by someone else's lies, but by my own resilience and cunning. Mark and Lily became memories, cautionary tales in my journal. I watched their arrogance crumble from afar, knowing I had executed every step perfectly. The anger, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, they had all been necessary. They had all led to this moment of triumph, this final, satisfying reversal. And as I looked out over my new city, the sunlight catching the edges of the skyline, I realized something essential. I was no longer a victim. I had survived the betrayal, endured the emotional games, and emerged stronger than I ever imagined. I had taken control, flipped the script, and found freedom in the most unexpected way. I smiled to myself, quietly, fiercely, knowing that I had won not through confrontation alone, but through patience, intelligence, and the unwavering knowledge that I deserved more than their lies. And that, in the end, made every sleepless night, every pang of doubt, and every moment of silent fury worth it.